Hey everyone, Britta Albert here. If this is your first time here, I'm a spiritual life coach. It's my goal for this channel to help you overcome the obstacles that are standing in the way of you living your best and most authentic life. Today's video, we are continuing on with the series Conversations with God. Now this video is going to talk about challenging relationships. If you did not see the first video on relationships, I do recommend to watch that video before you watch this one. I'll go ahead and put it in the cards up above. But if you've already seen the first video on relationships, then come along and we will go into this adventure. But if you've never seen a Conversations with God video, the way that I set this up is that first I'm going to play you a clip of the actual audiobook, so that way you can hear for yourself and you can decide for yourself what resonates as truth for you. At the end of the clip is when you'll hear my perspective, my take on it. Now, the reason that I separate the two instead of just telling you in the beginning what my opinion is or what I got out of it or me trying to explain to you what I think it's about is because it's coming through my filter, my lens of my own personal life experiences. And so what I think is going to resonate with some people, it might not resonate with everybody, but if you hear those words for yourself, you're going to get out of it what you need to hear for you. And so I want you to hear what you need to hear for you first. And then if you want to hear my opinion, stick around so that you can hear that at the end. So without further ado, I bring you Conversations with God.
You must first see yourself as worthy before you can see another as worthy. You must first see yourself as blessed before you can see another as blessed. You must first know yourself to be holy before you can acknowledge holiness in another. If you put the cart before the horse, as most religions ask you to do, and acknowledge another as holy before you acknowledge yourself, you will one day resent it. If there is one thing none of you can tolerate, it is someone being holier than thou. Yet your religions force you to call others holier than thou. And so you do it for a while. Then you crucify them. You have crucified, in one way or another, all of my teachers, not just one. And you did so not because they were holier than thou, but because you made them out to be. My teachers have all come with the same message, not I am holier than thou, but you are as holy as am I. This is the message you have not been able to hear. This is the truth you have not been able to accept. And that is why you can never truly, purely fall in love with another. You have never truly, purely fallen in love with yourself. And so I tell you this, be now and forever centered upon yourself. Look to see what you are being, doing, and having in any given moment, not what's going on with another. It is not in the action of another, but in your reaction that your salvation will be found.
Well, I know better, but somehow this makes it sound as though we should not mind what others do to us in relationship. I mean, like they can do anything, and so long as we hold our equilibrium, I guess, keep our self-centered and all that good stuff, nothing can touch us. But others do touch us, certainly touch me, and their actions sometimes hurt us. It's when the hurt comes into relationships that I don't know what to do. It's all very well to say stand aside from it, cause it to mean nothing, but that's easier said than done. I do get hurt by the words and actions of others in relationships.
The day will come when you will not. That will be the day on which you realize and actualize the true meaning of relationships, the true reason for them. It is because you have forgotten this that you react the way you do. But that's all right. That's part of the growth process. It's part of evolution. It is soul work you are up to in relationship. And that is a grand understanding, a grand remembering. Until you remember this, and remember then also how to use relationship as a tool in the creation of self, you must work at the level at which you are, the level of understanding, the level of willingness, the level of remembrance. And so there are things you can do when you react with pain and hurt to what another is being, saying, or doing. The first is to admit honestly to yourself and to another exactly how you're feeling. This many of you are afraid to do because you think it'll make you look bad. Somewhere deep inside of you, you realize that it probably is ridiculous for you to feel that way. It probably is small of you. You are bigger than that, but you can't help it. You still feel that way. There's only one thing you can do. You must honor your feelings. For honoring your feelings means honoring yourself. And you must love your neighbor as you love yourself. How can you ever expect to understand and honor the feelings of another if you cannot honor the feelings within yourself? The first question in any interactive process with another is, now who am I and who do I want to be in relationship to that? Often you do not remember who you are and do not know who you want to be until you try out a few ways of being. That is why honoring your truest feelings is so important. If your first feeling is a negative feeling, simply having the feeling is frequently all that is needed to step away from it. It is when you have the anger, have the upset, have the disgust, have the rage, own the feeling of wanting to hurt back, that you can disown these first feelings as not who you want to be. The master is one who has lived through enough such experiences to know in advance what her final choices are. She does not need to try out anything. She's worn these clothes before and knows they do not fit. They are not her. And since a master's life is devoted to the constant realization of self as one knows oneself to be, such ill-fitting feelings would never be entertained. That is why masters are imperturbable in the face of what others might call calamity. A master blesses calamity, for the master knows that from the seeds of disaster and all experience comes the growth of self. And the master's second life purpose is always growth. For once one is fully self-realized, there is nothing left to do except to be more of that. It is at this stage that one moves from soul work to God work, for this is what I am up to. I will assume for the purposes of this discussion that you are still up to soul work. You are still seeking to realize, make real, who you truly are. Life will give you bountiful opportunities to create that. Remember, life is not a process of discovery. Life is a process of creation. You can create who you are over and over again. Indeed, you do every day. As things now stand, you do not always come up with the same answer, however. Given an identical outer experience, on day one, you may choose to be patient, loving, and kind in relationship to it. On day two, you may choose to be angry, ugly, and sad. The master is one who always comes up with the same answer, and that answer is always the highest choice. In this, the master is eminently predictable. Conversely, the student is completely unpredictable. One can tell how one is doing on the road to mastery by simply noticing how predictably one makes the highest choice in responding or reacting to any situation. Of course, this throws open the question, what choice is highest? That's a question around which have revolved the philosophies and theologies of man since the beginning of time. If the question truly engages you, you are already on your way to mastery. For it is still true that most people continue to be engaged by another question altogether. Not what is the highest choice, but what is the most profitable. Or, how can I lose the least? When life is lived from a standpoint of damage control or optimum advantage, the true benefit of life is forfeited. The opportunity is lost. The chance is missed. For a life lived thusly is a life lived with fear, and that life speaks a lie about you. For you are not fear. You are love. Love that needs no protection, love that cannot be lost. Yet you will never know this in your experience if you continually answer the second question and not the first. For only a person who thinks there is something to gain or to lose asks the second question, And only a person who sees life in a different way, who sees self as a higher being, who understands that winning or losing is not the test, but only loving or failing to love. Only that person asks the first. He who asks the second question says, I am my body. She who asks the first says, I am my soul. Yea, let all those who have ears to hear listen. For I tell you this, at the critical juncture in all human relationships, there is only one question. What would love do now? No other question is relevant. No other question is meaningful. No other question has any importance to your soul.
So this is a little bit more challenging. This is really, as you saw where God said, if you have ears to hear, that statement doesn't mean that you don't have ears, right? It doesn't mean that you're deaf and you can't hear. If you have ears to hear, means that if you're at a certain place where you can get what the meaning, the true meaning of that message is, then this message is for you. If the message doesn't make sense, or it pisses you off, or you just completely disagree with it, then you don't have ears to hear. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It just means that this is not the right time in your life for this message. And down the road, after you have some more life experience, you may come back to this message or a message similar to this, and then it'll make sense. Then it'll click. Then it will have the meaning that it was intended to have. So because of the complexity of the way that we are with relationships, and again, what I talked about in the last video, when we look at our partner and we expect them to fulfill a certain role with us, it's not because we have decided in and of ourselves that that is the role that we expect from them. It's because it's societally expected. It's taught to us from the moments we are babes. We hear that cheating is wrong. We hear that, which is adultery. We hear that, mental abuse and physical abuse is wrong. And I'm not disagreeing with those things by any means. But we have these expectations of what is right and what is wrong, and it's very rigid. It's only black and white. But it's only when we get into the story do we realize what's going on, and we can have more compassion for the situation. Or say, for example, that you have a couple and they're choosing to do their marriage in a way that works for them, but it's not the traditional way that you would see that works for you, or how you feel that it works for you, or how you feel that they should be doing things. So say, for example, if you have a couple and they're very flirtatious and they have high sexual energy, and as a couple they have decided that it's okay to go flirt with other people, and they have made their own rules and expectations for their relationship that they both feel comfortable in, they both feel seen, they both feel secure, but you would not ever flirt with somebody because you're married or you're in a relationship, and you would expect that your spouse or your significant other would not flirt with somebody else. Just because it's not right for your relationship doesn't mean it's wrong for somebody else's relationship. So this goes more into not just our own relationships, but the way that we judge our neighbors, the way that we judge our friends and family members. If we knew some of the things that people were doing in the 70s, then we might kind of look side-eyed at them and be like, there's no way that's happening now. There's no way that people are having swinger parties now. I bet you there are. And there's different cultures in the world, not just the United States or North America, that they're more relaxed about things like that. And different tribes, they have different customs around marriage and sex and the age of consent. And we have the moral opinions and agreements that we have. And there's nothing wrong with the moral opinions and agreements that you have, that you choose to live within. Then you can choose to live in a society that is in alignment with the morals and opinions that you have. So say, for example, I do not agree with the age of consent being 12 years old or 10 years old. I do not agree with child marriages. I do not. I will call the cops on somebody happily without hesitation. I might hurt that person. I'm not sure. That's my moral compass. That's my belief. But I know that there are plenty of places in this world where that's not the reality. And it's not up to me to go into those governments and start a war because they're doing something that I disagree with. Now, if I really have a heart for this, I can get involved with charitable organizations that go in and try to help those people, right? But it's not up to me to judge and say that that entire country is wrong because they have a belief system that I don't agree with. And that is a more polarizing example. So that might be a harder one to swallow because it has to do with children and hurting children. And it's totally okay if that example did not resonate with you at all, because it's hard. It's hard when you're getting into these really big polarizing things. So let's take it back a step, okay? Let's say that you are in a relationship and your significant other commits adultery. The reality is there are some toxic beliefs within them and potentially within you that create the environment for that to happen. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily anyone's fault, even though you want to point the blame at the person who committed the adultery. And you want to say, just like Neale, like, listen to this message. Neale struggled with this, and he was like, well, I don't understand. Like, am I supposed to just let people hurt me? And God was saying, no, you have your boundaries. Remember from the first video, first you love yourself. When you love yourself, you have boundaries, and you do not allow people to walk over those boundaries or cross those boundaries. But what I'm talking about right now is judgment towards another person. And I'm not justifying why they're doing what they're doing, but they could come from a long line of people who have all committed adultery within their family lineage, and they're not the cycle breaker. Or maybe they are the cycle breaker, because I will tell you what, being a cycle breaker does not mean that you are immune from the cycle. Being the cycle breaker means you experience the cycle and then you stop the cycle. So whoever is in a family lineage where it's generation upon generation upon generation of people who have committed adultery, the cycle breaker will commit adultery, then they will change that behavior moving forward. They will break that cycle. Or at the very least, if they don't commit adultery, they will have adulterous thoughts, desires, and they will struggle with that energy. Depending on where and how young they are when they experience it, will probably determine if they give in and commit that adultery or not. But when you are in a family of alcoholics, if you don't struggle with alcoholism, it means you're not the cycle breaker. Somebody else broke the cycle in your family line. Just because you're the first one to not struggle with it doesn't mean you're the cycle breaker. If you're the cycle breaker, you're struggling with that addiction and you're gonna heal from it. That's what a cycle breaker looks like. So we can't judge what other people are coming here to experience. And that doesn't mean that we just let them hurt us, or we let them walk all over us, or we let them abuse us, right? We can have compassion. We can understand that what they're going through is on them, but the judgments don't have to come from us. The condemnation doesn't have to come from us. I can guarantee you it's going to come from them on themselves more than you can ever put on them. So then where does that leave us? Understanding that there's room for all of this. That there's no one way that's right. There's not one person who is a perfect spouse or a perfect significant other. There's not. Because you would have to be able to fulfill that person's needs fully in order to fit their definition of perfection. And where does that come from? Who determines what this perfection is? But you're not to be within their mold or expectation for you, and they're not to be within your mold or expectation for them. And I'm so sorry that we were all taught these things since we were young. And I'm so sorry that we had the examples that we did within our family. Some of us were better than others. Some of us struggled a lot more. And we had parents that struggled a lot with loving themselves or knowing who they are, having healthy relationships, and they didn't give us the example that we thought we should receive. That might mean that you're the cycle breaker, that you came in here to have that experience. Or if you're not, then that's okay too. It's meant for somebody else down the line in a future generation. When we have these relationships that are more challenging, you need to understand who you are, love yourself, and have your boundaries. And the biggest thing is honoring your own boundaries. Because when we have boundaries, you can set boundaries all day long, right? You can set boundaries for how you want to be treated. You can set boundaries for whatever. If you're not enforcing and honoring your own boundaries, they're just words. And then we have to go back to the video that I just did about the relationships and how do you heal yourself? How do you love yourself? If you're struggling to uphold your boundaries, then you need to go back and you need to learn how to heal that part of you so that you believe in your worthiness and you fight for your own worthiness. And that might be as simple as walking away. Or that might be choosing to heal within that relationship, and then they heal because you heal. It's not that you healed them or changed them, but I will tell you that healing people heal people. Just like hurt people hurt people. It has a ripple effect. Doesn't mean it's going to save your marriage, doesn't mean it's going to save your relationship, but sometimes it does. So you get to choose. You get to be the person who decides what you want to experience. Do you want to experience this healing and growth with your partner? Do you want to try? If you want to try, try. And if you don't succeed, that's okay. And if you do succeed, that's okay. You don't own the outcome to either, right? It just is. And can that be okay? Can there be room for all of this? I hope you guys enjoyed this one. I know this was a bit more challenging. It's hard to wrap our minds around that kind of grace when we think about being hurt by somebody or why they're doing the things that they're doing and how it's wrong for them to walk out on their families, or it's wrong for them to, whatever the storyline is that you've experienced or that's triggering you. I hear you, and it's completely valid. But I want you, again, go back, if you're still triggered, go back to the first video on relationships and listen again to my part at the end where I explain how do you love yourself, how do you heal yourself to where you are enough to sustain yourself. And that's why I said in the beginning, watch that video first, because without that foundation, you are doomed to enter a challenging relationship. There's no way to navigate it unless you love yourself. I love you guys. I hope that this was interesting, at least gives you a different perspective, and at best I hope that this was a freeing message for you. If this is your first time here, if this is the first video you've ever watched, why? Because I told you to watch the first one. Go back and watch the first relationship one. If this is not the first video that you've ever watched and you're coming back for more and you haven't subscribed, why have you not subscribed? But for real, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Let's continue to grow this family. I love you guys. If you think of somebody who needs to hear this message, I am telling you, it's going to make their day to share this message with them, and it will continue to have a ripple effect as we go, because healing people heal people. It's just the way that it is. You guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time.